The flames didn't just burn the forest, they chased her like demons. Every leap scorched her paws, every breath tasted like smoke and death. The bobcat clutched her tiny cub in her jaws, its whimper barely a whisper against the roar. Behind them, the world collapsed in crackling orange fury. Ahead, nothing but darkness and the smell of ash. Her muscles trembled, but stopping was never an option. Because in that firestorm, a mother's love was stronger than fear. If this moment made your heart stop, imagine what's next. Don't miss stories of courage like this. Hit subscribe and stay with us for every wild twist. The morning stretched golden over the rolling fields of rural Oklahoma. A narrow two-lane highway cut through miles of quiet pasture, the kind of road where drivers often lose themselves in thought. But for Linda Harper, a retired librarian on her way into town, that morning would become a memory she would never forget. She was humming softly to an old country tune when something unusual caught her eye on the shoulder up ahead, a small shape that didn't belong. At first, she thought it was another piece of roadkill. Sadly, she'd seen plenty over the years, armadillos, raccoons, even deer. But something about the way the shape shifted made her slow down. Pulling her pickup truck to the gravel shoulder, Linda leaned forward. There were two shapes, not one. Two tiny animals pressed close together. Her heart thudded as she realized what they were, bobcat kittens, no bigger than house cats. One lay frighteningly still, sprawled on its side. The other stood guard, its mottled coat gleaming in the morning light, ears perked like tiny sentries. Linda gripped the steering wheel, torn. These were wild animals, after all. She knew better than to approach them, especially cats with claws like that. But as she watched, her throat tightened. The healthy kitten, if you could call it that, was doing something that stopped Linda cold. It lowered its small head onto the limp body of its sibling, pressing close like a living shield. Every so often, it nudged the other gently with its nose as if to say, "Wake up. Please wake up." The scene tugged at something deep inside her. This wasn't just instinct. This was loyalty, love, the kind Linda had only ever seen in humans. She fumbled for her phone, hands trembling, and dialed the number for the local wildlife rehabilitation hotline she'd once saved after finding an injured owl years ago. When the dispatcher patched her through to a vet named Dr. Sarah Morgan, Linda's words tumbled out in a rush. "There are two bobcat kittens on Route 52. One looks bad, hurt real bad. The other won't leave it. It's guarding the little thing like it's family." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Stay in your vehicle and keep an eye on them. I'll be there as fast as I can." Linda nodded, though Sarah couldn't see her. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered, glancing back at the pair. For the next 30 minutes, Linda sat in her truck with the hazard lights blinking, watching those tiny warriors. Every rumble of a passing truck made her flinch, and every time, the healthy kitten pressed lower, curling tighter around its sibling like a furry shield against the world. When a state trooper finally stopped, Linda explained through the window, her voice cracking. The officer, a tall man with mirrored sunglasses, took a look and shook his head slowly. "Never seen anything like that," he murmured. "Bobcats don't do this. They're solitary." "Not these two," Linda said softly, eyes never leaving the roadside. "That little one hasn't moved an inch from its brother." And when a white SUV with wildlife rescue on the side finally crested the hill, Linda let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Help was here, but what happened next would stun them all. Dr. Sarah Morgan was a seasoned wildlife veterinarian with 15 years of rescues behind her, but nothing prepared her for the sight that greeted her. Two bobcat kittens, one crumpled and bleeding, the other alert and unyielding, standing guard like a soldier at its post. Moving with practiced caution, Sarah approached with a carrier and gloves, speaking in the low, calming tone she'd perfected over the years. "Hey, sweet babies," she murmured. "We're going to help." The healthy kitten's reaction froze her mid-step. It didn't hiss. It didn't bolt into the brush. Instead, it gave a sound that sent shivers through everyone present. Not quite a meow, not quite a cry, but something raw and pleading. It looked straight at Sarah, then at its sibling, then back again, its golden eyes blazing with desperation. "Oh my God," Linda whispered from behind her truck door. "It's asking for help." Sarah knelt slowly, extending her gloved hands toward the injured kitten first. The limp little body was frighteningly light, its rear leg bent at an unnatural angle, blood matting the fur along its flank. But it was breathing, Thank heaven, it was breathing. She eased the kitten into the carrier as gently as if it were glass. The healthy one never moved away. If anything, it leaned closer, watching every second with an intensity that made Sarah's throat tighten. "Come on, sweetheart," she said softly, reaching for the second kitten. "You can come too. I promise I'll take care of both of you." To everyone's astonishment, the kitten allowed itself to be lifted without a struggle. The moment Sarah placed it in the carrier beside its sibling, the little guardian curled around the injured one, resuming its protective embrace. Officer Hayes shook his head in disbelief. "I've seen some things," he said quietly, "but never that." Neither had Sarah. As she shut the carrier door and loaded it into her SUV, she could still hear the soft churring sounds coming from inside, a language older than words. Dr. Sarah Morgan was a seasoned wildlife veterinarian with 15 years of rescues behind her, but nothing prepared her for the sight that greeted her. Two bobcat kittens, one crumpled and bleeding, the other alert and unyielding, standing guard like a soldier at its post. Moving with practiced caution, Sarah approached with a carrier and gloves, speaking in the low, calming tone she'd perfected over the years. "Hey, sweet babies," she murmured. "We're going to help." The healthy kitten's reaction froze her mid-step. It didn't hiss. It didn't bolt into the brush. Instead, it gave a sound that sent shivers through everyone present. Not quite a meow, not quite a cry, but something raw and pleading. It looked straight at Sarah, then at its sibling, then back again, its golden eyes blazing with desperation. "Oh my God," Linda whispered from behind her truck door. "It's asking for help." Sarah knelt slowly, extending her gloved hands toward the injured kitten first. The limp little body was frighteningly light, its rear leg bent at an unnatural angle, blood matting the fur along its flank. But it was breathing. Thank heaven, it was breathing. She eased the kitten into the carrier as gently as if it were glass. The healthy one never moved away. If anything, it leaned closer, watching every second with an intensity that made Sarah's throat tighten. "Come on, sweetheart," she said softly, reaching for the second kitten. "You can come too. I promise I'll take care of both of you." To everyone's astonishment, the kitten allowed itself to be lifted without a struggle. The moment Sarah placed it in the carrier beside its sibling, the little guardian curled around the injured one, resuming its protective embrace. Officer Hayes shook his head in disbelief. "I've seen some things," he said quietly, "but never that." Neither had Sarah. As she shut the carrier door and loaded it into her SUV, she could still hear the soft churring sounds coming from inside, a language older than words. Over and Sarah carried the groggy male back into the room. Guardian erupted into frantic, muffled chirps. The moment Sarah eased him into the cage, the little bobcat pressed her body against his, licking his face, purring so loud the metal bars vibrated. Caleb's voice was thick when he whispered, "She hasn't left that spot for 2 hours." Sarah crouched beside the cage, exhaustion lining her face. "I've worked with hundreds of wild animals," she said softly, "but I've never seen a bond like this." For the next 3 days, the clinic lived to the rhythm of their recovery. Brave, that's what Caleb named the male. Healed slowly, his leg pinned and bandaged, movement limited to short, careful steps. Guardian shadowed him relentlessly. When Sarah tried to separate them for feeding, Guardian cried until her voice went raw. Sarah had always believed in releasing wild animals as soon as possible, giving them the freedom nature intended. But these two were different. For months old, yet as inseparable as newborns. More than that, they'd learned to trust humans in a way bobcats never should. If they went back to the wild, they'd be targets. One evening, as Sarah stood at the big window overlooking the back acres of her property, a 10-acre stretch of fenced land she used for rehabilitation, Caleb spoke the question she'd been avoiding. "So what happens when Brave's leg heals? Do we release them?" Sarah stared into the distance, the prairie glowing under the sunset. "If we do, we're sending them to die." She turned back to the cage where Guardian slept curled around her brother, her paw draped protectively over his side. "They've lost their fear of people. They won't survive out there." "Sanctuary," Caleb suggested. Sarah shook her head slowly. "Cages for the rest of their lives? After everything they've fought through?" She hesitated, the decision forming in her chest like a storm. Maybe there's another way. And as the orange light faded from the sky, the choice she had to make. one that would change all three of their lives forever. 2 weeks later, the prairie wind carried the first chill of autumn as Sarah stepped out onto the back porch of her property. Behind her stretched 10 acres of open land, grass whispering under the breeze, cottonwoods standing like sentinels along the perimeter fence. This was where she had released countless animals back to freedom. But today was different. Today wasn't about letting go. It was about giving two souls a second chance. Brave moved cautiously across the soft earth, his bandaged leg no longer bearing weight, but steady enough for short walks. Every few steps, he glanced back at the small shape shadowing him. Guardian followed like his echo, brushing against him with reassuring nudges. They had spent the last fortnight side by side, sleeping in one cage, eating from the same dish, playing gently under Sarah's watchful eye. But here, outside the confines of the clinic, their world opened wide. Brave froze as a gust rippled through the grass, ears twitching at the rustle of distant leaves. For a heartbeat, Sarah wondered if instinct would kick in, if they would sprint to the far edge of the fence and never look back. Instead, Brave turned, not to the horizon, but to Guardian. And Guardian pressed her nose against his cheek, as if to say, "It's okay. We're home now." Caleb stood beside Sarah, arms folded, awe softening his features. "They act more like partners than siblings," he said quietly. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. Whatever they are, they're bonded for life. The decision to keep them here hadn't been easy. Sarah had spent sleepless nights debating every angle: ethics, resources, the sheer responsibility of it. But every time she tried to imagine these two behind steel bars in a zoo, something inside her recoiled. No, they deserved sky and wind and space, even if it came with fences. So she had done what felt impossible 2 weeks ago, transformed her rehab acreage into a permanent sanctuary for two wild hearts that refused to let go of each other. As the sun dipped low, painting the land in molten gold, Brave settled in a patch of warm grass, his injured leg stretched out. Guardian curled against him immediately, her tail flicking like a banner of victory. For the first time since that roadside rescue, Sarah let herself breathe fully. "They're going to be okay," Caleb murmured, almost to himself. Sarah smiled faintly, though her eyes shimmered. "They were always going to be okay," she said, "because they had each other." Over the weeks that followed, life found its rhythm again. Sarah's clinic bustled with the usual calls: injured hawks, orphaned fawns, the endless work of patching wild things back together. But every evening, she would walk out to the enclosure with 2 dishes in hand and find Guardian and Brave waiting near the gate, side by side like sentinels of their own small kingdom. Some nights, under the silver wash of moonlight, Sarah would watch them move, Brave steady now, his limp barely visible, Guardian never straying more than a few feet from his side. She often thought about the moment on that highway when everything could have ended differently. If Linda hadn't stopped, if she hadn't answered the phone, if 2 tiny hearts hadn't fought so fiercely for each other. One evening, as the stars bloomed across the Oklahoma sky, Sarah whispered into the wind, "You didn't just survive. You saved each other." And somewhere beyond the fence, the coyotes howled, a wild chorus Sarah had heard all her life. But inside the sanctuary, beneath the cottonwoods, 2 bobcats lay pressed together in the grass, their bond unbroken, their future secure. They were no longer just names on a clinic chart. They were a story of loyalty, of love, and of the wild refusing to bow to despair. Guardian and Brave. Together. Always.